Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Roberts. Welcome to the May the 23rd edition of Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and above all, accountable to you, the show that takes a look at government here in Winstead and seeks to remind you that spending more money should not be the first answer to every problem. That for every government policy that fails, spending more money is not necessarily the answer. The first answer, usually the best answer, is spending our money more smartly. We are joined this evening by John Gorger, as we were last week. John, as most of you know, long-time resident of our town, long-time observer of our government, long-time participant in our government. John, welcome once again.
Thank you very much, James.
Last week, for those of you who are watching, we focused most of our attention on the revaluation, which is taking place this summer. Yes. We're not going to go through that in any great detail this evening, but John, why don't you hit on the highlights of what we talked about with respect to revaluation last week?
Well, last week we took the current grand list of approximately $100 million. We divided it up into a pie. 40% of it is Winstead, 28% of it is Highland Lake, 16% of it is Winchester, and we have another category, personal property and auto, we put at 16%. Those numbers, Winstead was $320 million, Highland Lake was $224 million, Winchester $128 million, and the auto and personal property $128 million. When we looked at the data that is being collected now by the assessor's office and passed on to Vision Appraisal, we see that the sales data states that Winstead is, the sales in Winstead from the appraised value of 2007 are down about 42%. So we multiplied the blue portion of the pie by 58.58 and we got 185 million. The lake sales at the lake are staying fairly consistent with the appraised value. They're down approximately 6%, the sales that we looked at. We multiplied the $224 million by 0.94 for a value of $210 million. Winchester was down approximately 24% in the sales data. Multiplied the Winchester number of $128 million by 0.76 and got $97 million. Personal property and autos, they're valued at market every year, so we kept that at 100%. We moved the $128 million down. And the grand list that we're projecting for October 1st of 2012 is approximately $622 million. Had a few calls. People asked me, well, you know, they're collecting the data now. Well, this is part of the data that is being passed on to Vision Appraisal, but you can measure it. You can go like I do on Zillow.com, and I did this Sunday. Took the first 20 properties in Winstead that I came to, and there are a variety of properties. One is 143 Meadow Street that's being judicially foreclosed. Kevin Nelligan is handling that. One is 36 Walnut Street, the old Greystone, appraised value of $463. It's on the market for $336. One is 49 High, a house owned by the Methodist Church, been on Zillow for 243 days. Appraised value in 2007 of $263,000. It's on the market for $135,000 now. So we looked at these 20 properties representing $3.75 million. The asking price is $2.27 million. So the asking price is 60% of the appraised value in 2007. So going forward, in the downtown area, you're seeing an asking price of 60% of the 2007 appraised value.
And that obviously is the asking price. Who knows what those properties actually trade for? So
right.
I think it would be fair to say that as you have been following this data historically, the discount has been getting bigger each and every 6-month period that you do this.
I've started from 2007 with the last reval, and I collected as the property values are loaded into Vision Appraisal on a 6-month basis. And for the Old Town area that I call my area on this, it's gone from 18 to 24 to 36 to now it's 42. So it's down. It's approaching a 50% discount, and that reflects through the grand list and how the grand list is split up. The new grand list that we're projecting of $221 million is going to be, the biggest portion is going to be Highland Lake, 34%. The next portion will be Winstead at 30%. The auto and personal property will be 20%, and 16% will be Winchester. Can vary a little bit. I mean, people can say, well, the grand list now is higher. I believe it's probably about 860 million. But these are the numbers we used, and the swings are dramatic. We're not talking about decimal points.
So, not to put too fine a point on it, ladies and gentlemen, the effect of the reval is going to be very unpleasant for most of us. Not to put too fine a point on it, if you'll excuse my French, we are getting screwed here. Downtown is seeing a 42% decline in property values, 42% down, and yet downtown taxes will only drop, per these calculations, by approximately 25%. If that's not getting screwed, I don't know what is. Highland Lake, property values down 6%, taxes actually going up 21%, paying more for less. If that's not getting screwed, I don't know what is. The businesses and commercial properties in town, the plumbers, the electricians, the small contractors, the people who you know, who you live among, who are your neighbors, their personal property, their business assets will see taxes increase of approximately 30%. If you're trying to run a small business here in town, you're going to see the taxes on your business assets up 30%. That's getting screwed, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when we have a government that is not truly effective or efficient or affordable. This is what happens when you do not hold your government accountable. Policies aren't put in place that will drive the long-term sustainability, the long-term health, the long-term balance of a community. And when that happens, the community begins to break apart.
And one thing I'll inject here is that we took the $800 million of the current grand list, we divided it by the 622 of the projected new grand list, and you come up with a figure of about 1.265, 1.266. So it's telling you that if to collect the same revenue, that your mill rate is going to have to go up 26.5%. And these are averages, okay? We have properties that we're recording at the lake that are actually selling for higher, the waterfront properties that are selling for higher than their 2000 assessed value. I mean, these are going to see 50 and 60% increases. We have properties that are back from the lake that are selling for less. But when you average it out, the lake area is holding fairly constant to the 2007 appraised value.
So why have we started this series of shows on the subject of the reval? Why is the reval important? The first comment I'd make is that you are probably being told, you're getting probably postcards in the mail, you're getting phone calls at night, which says, vote for the budget. Vote for the proposed budget. It's a 9% increase, yes, but it's the first increase we've had in so many years. It's really no more than a cup of coffee a day. It's a little bit of roads, it's a little bit for the schools. It's really not a big increase. Well, from where I'm coming from, 9% sounds like an awfully big increase. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just 9%. It's 9% plus the reval. It's 9% plus the fact that if you're downtown, your property just dropped 40%, and yet your taxes only dropped 25%. It's 9% plus if you live at Highland Lake, an increase on the average of 20%. It's 9% plus if you're a small businessman, a 30% increase in your business asset taxes. It's 9% plus the impact of the revaluation, and that is not a small thing. That is not a cup of coffee. That is not something that we dismiss because we haven't had an increase in the last couple of years. That is an epochal increase. And whether or not our community can sustain that is the burning question of the hour, and the question that you must ask yourselves in the next 12 days, the next 10 days, as we come up to this budget vote. That's the first reason why the reval is important, ladies and gentlemen, because the numbers are big. And when you think about a budget that already has a 9% increase baked into it, and you're looking at tax increases on top of that of 20, 30, 40, 50% in some instances, I mean, where does it end, ladies and gentlemen?
The key is when you look at a piece of property, the magic number that keeps the property alive or vibrant or viable is taxes should be 1.25%, no more than 1.25 to 1.5% of the appraised value. What happens in Connecticut with these revals is that you still want to collect the same amount of revenue at the end of the day. So if your grand list drops, you bump up your mill rate and you bury the property. There's no way you can recover and you get abandonment. And you can go down Oak Street, you can look at 246 Oak Street, you can look at 249 Oak Street, I drive by them every day. You can go up on Cottage Street, you can look at 50 Cottage Street. The properties are being abandoned. You have the number of units in Winstead, over 50% of them are rental properties. They've been cut up and made into rental properties, and this was done when property values were high. As the market as the floor is pulled out from under the market and it collapses, people just walk away. And you're left with the abandonment. And you're seeing the contraction of the town. You saw a bank cut half of its capacity and put half of its capacity up for sale. You're seeing the health center, the viability of the health center being questioned. 3 years ago, we were talking about competition of Barkhamsted building a health center versus Winstead building a health center. Now you're looking at, can Charlotte Hungerford even afford it?
Right.
So you're going to get that question answered, I believe, in July or August sometime. You're looking at other people pulling back and trying to conserve their cash to stay alive.
What John is alluding to here is the fact that the reval exists not just in the realm of politics, not just in the realm of should you vote yay or nay on this budget, should you include it in the 9% or not. The reval is just a symptom of a long-term structural change in our community and is not a change for the better. The reval is a symptom of a catastrophic failure of our downtown. And the attempt to shift the burden that results onto the outlying areas. This is not something that works, ladies and gentlemen. A town must, by definition, have some degree of balance in it. A town, yes, will always have richer areas and less rich areas, areas that are improving in value and areas that are declining in value. But there cannot be long-term trends such that you see abandonment, blight, empty buildings, dereliction through grand swaths of our downtown architecture. We cannot have a main street that is primarily empty or composed of storefronts that change over. We cannot have downtown neighborhoods where one in X number of houses is empty with grass growing out of the driveway and a junked car outside. This is not a community. This is not sustainable.
And you can't fix it by hiring a planner. And you can't fix it by doing Band-Aid types of things. I mean, we've had planners. We've had planners for many years. It doesn't get at the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is the tax structure on these old buildings is so high that it's abandonment, and if you have to put something in place, if you want to reclaim them, to bring the cost down, number one, and number two, if you don't want to reclaim them, knock them down. Number one, it alleviates the problem of the blight. Number two, it alleviates the problem of kids in your school system, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we're talking about a big chunk of town, and many communities are going through this now. I mean, Detroit is going through this. I mean, people, they tax it until they could tax no more, and it was abandonment, and people left. And now they're taking 2/3 of Detroit and turning it back into a forest.
Right. I mean, the simple reality, ladies and gentlemen, is the grand list is the tax capacity of our town. As the grand list declines, even without these shifts in sharing that we're talking about, as your grand list declines, you get to raise less taxes. As your grand list declines, you get to borrow less money. We've heard people fantasizing in this town about the mega bonds, the idea that we're going to rebuild schools and hospitals and town hall and police stations and firehouses and the whole 9 yards, $75, $100 million worth of borrowing. Well, if your grand list is down 20%, 30%, 40%, you can't do that. You probably can't borrow anything until you get some stability, some real visibility going forward that there is the political will to solve these issues, to address these issues, and to begin to dig our way out from these issues. You probably can't borrow anything at all.
And it has to start. It has to start with some efficiency. Back in, I'm going to have to look at the date on the vote. November 24th, 2010, we had an amendment to the charter to include the financial affairs of the Board of Education under the finance director. Yes, 2,245, no, 772. If we can't even get these efficiencies built into the system, to go to a common computer system, to go to one set of software, to go to one director, and have a common platform to enter all this data. If people want to break the system down into smaller and smaller pieces, it's going to collapse. Now you have, some things people are willing to do. If you look at Gilbert and Regional, they are willing to put a football team on the field together. But they can do many other things together. If you look at various things in the community, at the Litchfield Hills Council of Elected Officials, they're looking at doing a council-wide reval. I don't know if all the towns would go at the same date, or they would just use the same revaluation firm over a period of years, but they're trying to bring the costs down there. You can do a lot more than these things to bring the cost down and to reduce the cost on the properties that are here. If you don't, they'll be abandoned and you'll get no taxes.
Right. Clearly we have a problem here. It's a big problem. It's a long-term problem. Government, when faced with problems, has to do two things. In the near term, it has to make sure that it does no harm. It cannot make the problem worse. And in the long term, it has to figure out a solution. In the context of our government and the problems we face right now, that near-term question is, does the government's chief policy document, its budget, does that document pass the hurdle of doing no harm? Does our budget, our proposed up 9% budget, reflect a willingness of this government to recognize the structural problems inherent that are revealed by the revaluation and to behave accordingly? Well, let's just look at what the budget is promising us. It's promising us a 10% increase or 9% increases on taxes, and for very little, quite frankly. For a lawnmower, a bunch of trucks, more people, more consultants, more planners, more benefits. It's just more of the same old stuff. Doing no harm doesn't mean raising more taxes to do the same old stuff. That's doing a whole boatload of harm, ladies and gentlemen. Doing no harm, as John suggests, is finding efficiencies, cutting costs. The school board promised to close the building. Well, go ahead, close the building. The town voted to combine the finance staffs. Go ahead, combine them. Rather than simply saying, we need to buy a new fire truck, we need to buy turnout gear, let's figure out whether the footprint of our fire department is appropriate. These people do good work, ladies and gentlemen. No one is saying that they don't. But at the end of the day, if we can't afford to pay for them, we can't afford to pay for them, period. Public Works, let's figure out whether, do we really need more trucks? Do we really need a deputy director? Would we be better off outsourcing the whole kit and caboodle? Ask Mr. Rinaldi, poor Mr. Rinaldi from Platt Hill, trying to get his drainage sorted out. He was given the wonderful opportunity, well, you spent 10 grand on your drainage, why don't you go spend another 10 grand and sort out all of our problems? That's not the right answer, ladies and gentlemen. You know that, we know that. This budget fails the first hurdle. It doesn't meet the test of doing no harm. The sad thing is it also makes very little effort to fix the underlying problem. Would you suggest that this budget is tackling the problem?
It has to get back to the basics, and if your property values are collapsing, the only thing I can give in a comparable nature is When you look at California, California has a non-judicial foreclosure process, and when the taxes or when the property values collapse, the taxes collapse on a property because they put them at 1.25%. So that's measured, okay? The building is never going to be put under by the taxes, whether the price of the building is $1 million or $500,000. And government has to readjust or borrow, and in California they tend to borrow quite a bit, with the expectation that the property values are going to rise. But it doesn't put the property underwater. Here, with the mechanism that we have in the state of Connecticut, you'll never come up. You'll never come up for air.
Yeah, I mean, this budget has been described charitably as doing a little for a lot of people. Some of us, perhaps less charitably, would say it does absolutely nothing for a lot of people. It has been described as a roads budget. It is not a roads budget, ladies and gentlemen. You know, doing a little bit of work on half of Newfield Road, not even all of it, and Monroe Place, is hardly taking a major step forward in improving our road infrastructure. We can't even get, as I say, Mr. Rinaldi's drainage issues fixed. There's no money spent on downtown rehab. None. There's no money, there's no capital money at all for schools. There was $340,000 in last year's budget, zero in this one. There's no money for educational programs. There's no money for fixing anything of any substance other than throwing a few coins, a few silver coins, in a variety of directions at people who have votes, at constituencies who can muster votes. That is not fixing our problems. And with every day that goes by that we don't fix our problems, with every budget that goes by that simply shifts the tax burden more unfairly onto smaller and smaller groups of people, with every day that goes by that simply puts a more unsustainable tax burden on business, on commerce, on the taxpayers outside town, and still fails to have tax reductions downtown match the declines in value, then we're not making any meaningful progress. But we could, ladies and gentlemen. We all know what sort of steps need to be taken to actually begin to fix this. They're not easy steps. They're not overnight steps. They take political will. At some point, they take a certain amount of investment. But we have to do this sensibly. We have to do this in the context of the times in which we are in. Right now, we have to retrench. We have to find those efficiencies, cut services, cut benefits, cut whatever we have to do to arrive at a budget that does no harm, that doesn't increase the burden. And as we do that, we will buy ourselves the time to begin to institute the sorts of changes that will begin to fix the long-term problem, that will begin to fix the catastrophic decline in value downtown and all of the abandonment and blight and the long-term issues that brings with it. I mean, I think you and I both know what these answers are. That they're not new, they're not novel, they're not revolutionary.
You know, you just have to have the political will to put them in place.
Right.
I mean, the numbers of rental properties in the downtown area. I mean, there has to be a program put in place that converts them back into single-family homes. And I can give you an example in Newport. Okay, when Newport hit the bottom of the barrel, Newport, Rhode Island, they put tax policies in place where if people put a business in the downtown area of Newport, Rhode Island has I guess an income tax, and the cities can charge an income tax, but the city of Newport said they wouldn't charge income tax on those goods and services produced downtown. They also gave them windows of opportunity to make improvements to the building, and they didn't have to buy permits or whatever, but the buildings were inspected, the work done on the buildings were inspected. And, you know, street by street, you know, one street took hold and then it went on.
That's the way you got to do it. I mean, you have to bite the bullet, you have to knock down buildings where it makes sense to knock them down, where there is no real short-term solution. You have to provide tax benefits both to individuals and to your businesses and prospective businesses, you have to invest. You have to get out of the mindset from simply spending more money on more salaries or more benefits for the same people or more people to do the same things which haven't worked, which aren't working. And you got to take some portion of that money and invest it in things which actually have a taxable value. We need to build business. We need to build back our downtown residential stock.
Excuse me, it wasn't Newport. Newport is a fairly wealthy community. I believe it was.
Newport.
I believe it was Providence or one of the other towns that was very hard hit.
But Newburyport has done the same thing. Boston has done the same thing. I mean, talking to a businessman 6 months ago who said, if I go into town hall and I have to pay all my taxes on day one, why can't I get a discount on that? It would help me. It would help the town. The town has no interest in that. No interest. We can't have another selectmen's meeting where someone like the farmer's market is told you can only come to town if you fail. If you grow, if you attract a single new customer, we don't want you. We can't have that. We can't have Mr. Rinaldi told, you go fix not only your own problems, but fix all of the problems of Platte Hill. And we'll allow you to pay for that. Gee, isn't that nice?
Now we're bringing more subsidized housing to downtown, to a fairly limited downtown area. So your critical mass declines. And the businesses that are there and that employ people are moving out of town.
Yeah, I mean, this is moving in the wrong direction. And we're providing tax subsidies for those developments.
Yeah.
Astonishing, a 15-year tax subsidy. Now, we all know that the less fortunate need somewhere to live. But we are not a big, major city with the resources to shelter everyone.
Well, you have 20% now. You're approaching 20% of the housing units will be subsidized. Most towns have 3 and 4%.
Right. We are not Romania. If you were born here, you do not have a right to live here free, gratis, and for nothing for the rest of your born days. That's not how it works, ladies and gentlemen. This is America. You got to pay. And if you pay, if you invest, you get back. You get back more than you put in. That's the way the system works.
And you have to look, the number of kids in the school is getting smaller and smaller. I believe it's down 300 kids over a 5-year period. And this goes to the heart of the matter. You have a community college here. You have a brand new science and engineering building. You have to utilize those assets with your students and utilize the cost reduction to bring yourself to savings. It benefits the kids. They have excellent teachers there. They have excellent laboratories. And it benefits the town because you pay less.
Yeah, I mean, John and I aren't going to agree on every detail of this. But by and large, yes, we need to use our fixed, tangible assets much more effectively. We need to trim down on our people, and we need to use them more effectively too. We need to recognize that Winstead isn't working. It's not. Winstead isn't working. And we need to collectively commit to change that. We need to collectively get to a position where Winstead is working, where Winstead is working for you. And the way we do that is by ensuring that our current policies do no harm in the short term, and by ensuring that our current policies build towards a long-term solution. A 9% tax increase is not doing no harm. A 9% tax increase is unsustainable, particularly unsustainable in the context of the reval, where we started out, will lead to tax increases on various portions of our community of up to 40, 50, 60%. Unsustainable. We need a budget that does no harm in the short term and that builds a foundation for the future. For that reason, we will not be supporting the current budget. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back next week for a wrap-up show prior to the referendum. We will be asking you to vote, not just with your pocketbooks, but to vote for a government that is effective and efficient and affordable and above all, accountable to you. Because only when you're looking over that government's shoulder, ladies and gentlemen, will you get the government you want and deserve. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.